So this is a little bit of a special stream because there are only so many days that you start working with the new team or however have you, and for quite some time I've been trying to figure out what sort of team I'd want to work on in terms of growing myself, because on one end I mentor and do things like that, but even when you mentor folks and stuff like that, mentoring really, that's like keeping up with folks like one day a week or something like that, catching up with people, make sure that their business is going in the right trajectory. It's not as busy of a thing as you might think, because that's what I've been doing a lot of in the past. But I've started looking for an engineering team, and I found one, and I joined the Blumira engineering team. And so I was going to talk about my journey that brought me here, because I'm an engineer, I build things, and I build businesses too, things like that. So I'm known for things like Notia Point, the Olympiad, Logarithm, things like that. I have my fingers in a lot of, I guess, things these days. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit is, what in the world did my career have to look like to do some of the like unusual types of work that I do? What types of work do I do in the first place? I work entirely remotely with basically cloud technologies and what you could consider, I guess, like cloud pipelines, but basically code. I'm some form of a software engineer. And so I want to talk a little bit about the story of my career a little bit, because I didn't just randomly start doing the things that I do. And sometimes when I talk about what I do, folks are like, wow, how do you know so much? Well, you're going to know how I know what I know. It's not that I just magically know things. And there's a lot I don't know. Like, there's more that I don't know than I actually know, which is also why I also like to grow. And I myself am always looking for opportunities to figure out more, learn more, understand more. Like, I'm always trying to push my limits, I guess, is however you want to go there. And I'm a community person, so I'm always trying to figure out like who could actually benefit from what I do, because not everyone actually can benefit from the things I'm good at. And that goes for most people. Not everyone is going to benefit from the things that you're really, 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 really good at. And maybe they will. There's certain universal things that everyone benefits from. And I guess in ways, like if I build software and build cloud pipelines and things like that that help people develop stuff, I guess that, somewhere down the chain, everyone ends up getting value out of the stuff that I do. But really, like, where did a lot of my career stuff start? Because if I go all the way back to like my early parts of my career, when I turned like 18 and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to get some work, I would just freelance. And I would do small business contracts, and I would either help people with like computer problems or technology issues, or I'd make video content for people and things like that. I used to make like videos for like big events and graduations, including my own graduation, which is how I started doing that in the first place. When I graduated from high school, I started a company, and I basically made videos for people, and then I'd help people with stuff, random things. I'd even clean people's attics, like whatever it took. Like, what do you need? And then one of the big ones is I just was good with technology and things along those lines. But eventually I went a little further with whatever I was doing, and I wanted to get into public speaking. And so I would actually DJ as well, and I would work at this conference center. And I was going to college for public speaking, and that's ultimately not really where my career really worked out. Because at one point during this phase of my life, I pretty much broke my hips, and that ended a lot of what I was going to try to do when I was working, hauling equipment around, going to conference centers, setting up lights, and all these, I broke my hips. Yeah, there we go. So I broke my hips. There you go. And was I going to be a person who worked in technology? No, I was in college at this time. And because people always want to know, like, I think I got like 50 direct messages, somewhere north of 50 direct messages. I looked at the count, and then I was trying to keep up with direct messages of people asking me what I'm up to and things like that, and what I'm doing after some of my new announcements. So I figured it's easier for me to just stream it and talk about it, because like it's, you know, so right now I'm streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Because everyone's, not everyone, but those who are trying to build their careers or trying to figure out like what are the things that seem to be working for me. A lot of you are curious about what are those things that work. So a lot of folks ask, where did I start? This is where I started. I had broken hips. I started with broken hips, and we're going to get into the parts that turn good. What it did is it caused me to start working with computers, which is a good thing. So I got a desk job selling cell phones, which was maybe the best life choice I've ever made. And this was where my life, like, this was like a turn in my life. This was like when things were starting to turn for the best, turning out really good. And so really, you know, I'm kind of an ambitious person to the point of like sometimes where it's I go too far to where I kind of try to take on too much. And at this time, you know, I broke my hip snowboarding, if anyone wanted to know that in particular. So snowboarding, if you wanted to know, snowboarding ended my old career goals. I don't know if that's depressing or what, but anyways, it's not that depressing, because here I am today. As we go way down the road, I was like, well, I gotta work somehow, even though I'm trying to recover from this thing and I can't walk around, I can't haul equipment around, I can't haul these big speakers and stuff like that. And so I would sell Verizon cell phones, and you know, I started working with like satellite technologies at this place, and they worked with like networking technologies, and they worked with all the different things. And so what did I do at this little place? And so I just have to say, like, this is where my life changed. This is where I started with, and any of you who followed me for a while, is where I got into malware. Malware is what I spent maybe most of my time, is just like in deep dark corners cleaning malware and figuring out the root cause of the malware and analyzing the malware and malware now, you name it, like all this stuff. And then I started getting into, at the same place, disaster recovery. And how did I even get into this stuff? I was selling cell phones and they needed help, and they were like, well, we need help in these areas. And I was like, oh, you need help with this thing? I mean, I'll try to help, I guess. That's fine. And they were like, wait, you really? Okay. Well then come on, come help. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what malware was. I had no idea what malware is supposed to do. I had no idea what my name was. No, actually, I did know what my name was, but I didn't necessarily know the stuff about technology that I do know now. And really, this is like in, what, like 2008, 2009 or something like that? I don't, 2008, 2009, 2008. So when was this? Just so anyone's wondering, like, when did I start doing these things? And how long did it take until I really started to know what I was doing with any of this stuff? 2008, I didn't know what was going on. And I worked with disaster recovery, I worked with malware. Let's list out some other things. So I would work with universal compatibility was a big thing, especially for retrieving data. And this was during the recession was happening at this time. So basically, I had a lot of experience with people going out of business. Companies, it was kind of depressing. I'm not going to, like, even I didn't make much money at this time. I think I made like, it's just nobody had money at this time. The place, we were just trying to stay in business like everybody else. And we're just trying to survive, you know. And I think about that because that's what kind of 2020 was, a lot of just trying to survive. And that's a lot of where my career started, was just trying to survive. And I'll tell you, when you're trying to survive, you learn. That's a universal. I don't know if that's a first principle. If you don't know what I mean by first principles, look up first principle thinking. But I don't know if that's a first principle. Maybe it is. But anyways, for those who are trying to wonder, like, where did my career start to really kind of take off? And then here we go. So like networking and satellite technologies. And then also working with incident response, because this was in a small town. And so some of you are like, how did you do all of this? This company took care of the technology for an entire town, and I think there's like 5 of us. And so ultimately became a little bit of everything. I was like the help desk. I refurbished computers over there. There we go. Refurbish. And not just computers. I would refurbish systems of sorts. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And then I got into incident response too for the first time. And I would work with, compliance with HIPAA and things like that with the medical facilities in the region because, well, we worked with everyone. And so you name it. I started in a small town. I grew up in a city, and I didn't want to be in the city. And so I was like, I'm going to college in a small town. And I went to a small town, and you get a job in a small town, and you have you're a big fish in a small pond because, well, anyone who does anything helpful in a small town, they're the specialist for that town because really, if you have 1,000 people in a town, or maybe even 10,000 people in a town, that's not a lot of people. There are some companies that have 10,000 engineers. And if you're trying to go in a place where you're trying to compete with a lot of people who have skills, like in a city and things like that, cities, you're going to believe that you're going to compete against like tens of thousands of people. But this was also pre-internet. So a lot of you are like, well, why didn't you just go? The internet's so saturated when you're looking for jobs online. There was no really looking for jobs online where I lived. I got the job that I got from a newspaper. A newspaper ad. Got the job from a newspaper ad. I'm serious. I got that job from a newspaper ad. And I just need to say thank you to these people, these wonderful, wonderful individuals. So just shout out to, if you're watching, because I know some of you watch me still, I want to say thank you to the Larsons and Stu Ferguson, Greg Larson, and also Bonnie Smith, and everyone else who was just really helpful. So for those who are watching, I really just want to say thank you, and I appreciate everything that you taught me because I really, really would have no idea how to do anything that I do at the level that I do if it wasn't for all of you. And it's really strange because in a small town, you don't necessarily think about how big the things that you do in the small town are, and maybe all of you don't necessarily, when we work together, I don't think any of us thought that. Well, I remember saying I was never going to work in computers. That convinced me to work with computers. I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to be a public speaker. I'm pretty sure at the time I was still stuck on being a public speaker, but there's a lot of things that didn't really work out. But they were like, but you're good with computers though. And I was like, yeah, but I'll never work with computers. And that's just how I was at the time. And so then because we were in a downturn, I moved to the city. And this was a really interesting time. So I moved to the city. And that was stressful. I couldn't figure out trying to get work. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the city. We're going to just map some of this out and draw a few pictures here. So if I started here in, I guess, the house that I grew up in, and this was the start. So that's the start, right? And I was like, what, 18? Okay, great. So, and then here, after I started doing that stuff, then it's college, right? So we go over here. Now I'm a little older. So just because folks are always wondering, how did I do this? So 18, and then I went to college at some point, and then we get to about 2000. I'm still in college at this point, right? So all of this is still college. And then finally, I was still working there when I graduated. So I was out of college when I was doing this stuff. So I was still I was no longer in college at some point, so I graduated in 2010. So I guess we'll just put the date on here too while I'm at it. 2010. So I don't need to necessarily type that out. I'll just draw some of it because it's faster. So I moved to the city, and then what happens in the city? Like, I couldn't find work for the life of me doing what I was trying to do. I failed to get the work I wanted to get. So I failed at all of my goals. And I had said that I would never work with computers. And I'm serious, it's so funny because, like, I grew up with computer things. I was an ethical hacker, other things like that. So if we go all the even further back, so we can go. We're not going this far back. Before I turned 18, I got into kid trouble, so we'll just leave that back there. But that's nothing. I didn't do anything to have any weird records or anything like that. I'm not like on some criminal record thing, which is very helpful. It keeps you out of trouble when you don't have to worry about those things. And you know, accidents happen. But before 18, I learned to try to not get into having any permanent records. So failed all of my goals. And what did I do after I failed my goals? I buckled and gave into working with computers. So, me having an aptitude for computers, I was looking for work, and this person like was willing to give me an interview, and they were like, well, we're building cloud. Like, we're going to build this cloud platform. And at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about how a cloud platform might work or how you're going to build a cloud platform. I just knew some computer things, which I didn't know what was valuable, what was not valuable. I didn't know. I generally just had absolutely no idea whatsoever. So I'm sitting here trying to figure out, like, okay, so I'm going to try to interview for this place. And then so I go to this interview, and they told me no. Literally. They said, no, we're not going to hire you, no. And then on my way out of the interview, I was just like, no, I'm not taking no for an answer. So I literally begged. So I didn't even know that I was begging for something valuable. That sounds crazy. Maybe it doesn't sound crazy, but I was like, look, I'm a hard worker. The only thing that I know that I'm good at is computers. I tried to be a public speaker. It didn't work out. And I'm like, well, maybe the computer thing is what I'm good at. I have no idea. I'm still young. I'm in my 20s trying to figure out who I am, what I'm good at. And I'm just like, okay, I just need to find something that I can do that's going to let me make a living. And so I got hired as in an operations center. I guess we could just say a network operations center. We could call me a NOC specialist, right? And so once again, this is where I got to go back to using the things that I learned with disaster recovery, working with malware, working with all this stuff, built, and then I started getting into dashboards, right? It's like I talk about dashboards these days. Hey, dashboards. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. So somehow that never left me, for better or for worse. The dashboards just kind of came with me ever since that happened. And then this was also my first experience with trying to figure out what was actually SIM, and I didn't know what SIM was. And we were building a SIM, and then I remember at one point I was just, what was I trying to do? I was starting another company, because I'm always starting random companies. So all along the way, I think in between here, I think I had maybe like 3 failed businesses or something like that. Now I've figured out how to make businesses work. But back then I didn't even know how to make a business work. I didn't know how to make a business run on its own. I didn't know how to make, like, I don't know. It's not something that I knew how to do. I know a lot of people don't necessarily know how to do that. But like I grew up, my parents were entrepreneurs. Maybe I should outline that. Is my parents were entrepreneurs, so I knew business things as a kid. And my dad, he's still at that company that they started way back when. So my parents, I just grew up basically like raised by like investors and entrepreneurs. So that, that's the context that I come from. So now I'm over here building cloud, building this thing that I didn't even know was called a SIM, or trying to accomplish this thing that I didn't even know was necessarily a SIM. And it wasn't even just for security. It was just we needed a proper operations center, and we needed a whole bunch of other things. And so, I'd build like automation. I started first time working with a lot of scripting. I spent a lot of time learning like shell and things like that, and PowerShell and all that good stuff. So anyways, that was really like the next step where I got into, I guess, some of the, I don't know, when I talk to folks, it seems like it's less common that folks work in more of like the cloud space and like data center stuff. And so I actually got to work with in data centers. So I'd actually go to a data center. So, those rooms with lots of servers as walls, basically. So that was a fun experience. And it was really fascinating just seeing like, we think about like Google, and we think about Amazon AWS, and we think about this cloud thing. But what about when you're the one building it, right? When you're the one building it, especially when you're still just kind of learning, and I'm just coming off of not, in 2008, I had no idea what I was doing at all. And now it's like 2010. Actually, this is more like 2011, 2012. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to like work with this stuff. And so finally, I started getting a few certifications, things like that. So, but the certifications weren't really what made any of what I'm trying to accomplish work. I'll note them, I guess. Like, yes, I got certifications. People ask, but did you get any certification? Yes, I got certifications. I appreciate getting the certifications, but the certifications aren't the thing that made me successful. So just pay attention to that part. So, got certifications. So, yes, I do have a degree as well. Yes, so I have certifications and a degree. But if I'm honest, the degree and the certifications still aren't the things that allow me to do the kind of work that I do. Because if I'm ever going to work with someone, and someone wants to come try to like work with me, there's certain things you need to know to be even like, I guess, the concept of being qualified. With the work that I do, it's skill based. If you can't actually do the work, or you don't know the terms, it's a nightmare already. And so it's like a nightmare that's going to be a nightmare, and that's just not fun. So like technology is really crazy. I think it's fascinating. I love it. But that then led to me going to the company that I'm most known for is Logarithm. So that's when I finally, at this point, Logarithm actually poached me. One of the good folks who worked with me, one of my best friends on the planet, Julian. I should get you on this channel sometime. Anyways, one of my best friends came from this company over here where we were building cloud, and it was like, you should come to this company. And then that company, I remember like they were messaging me, and then they're calling me. You're like, do you want to talk? And I was like, well, no, not really, because I'm trying to start this other company. And I had a client, we had started working together and all this stuff. And I was planning on just going like full-time on my own thing at some point with like the skills that I built, because I felt like I'd learned a lot. At this point, I was like, wow, I know more than I ever maybe thought I'd ever know about technology. By the time we got to these pink cards right here, I was like, I don't know how you could possibly know more than this. This is crazy. And then that's when I was like, okay, so Logarithm's talking to me, and they're like, hey, do you want to come work at Logarithm? I was like, well, not really. And then they were like, well, think about it. What do you want? And I was like, well, I don't know what I want at the time. That was my problem back then. I literally was like, well, I don't really know what I want. And they were like, well, this is what we have over here. And they were explaining like the people and the lifestyle, and they have like free lunch on on Fridays, and everyone has lunch together on Fridays. And I was like, what? Really? And like they were like, yeah, and we go on company trips together and stuff like that, and we do all this stuff, and we have travel opportunities. You can come over and you can consult with people, and you can do stuff abroad, and you can do all kinds of stuff. And I was like, well, I mean, And I had a passion, so this is the thing that got me, is I have an itch for travel. And this is where Logarithm got me, is they were like, you could travel. I was like, I could what? They were like, you could travel. And I was like, did you just say the TRAVEL word? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And so then I started listening, and I decided to continue interviewing with Logarithm, and I was like, oh, yes, I'll interview. And they're like, go to professional services. You'll get to use your computer skills, and they'll let you travel. And I was like, really? And that swept me away inside so hard that I was like, I'm gonna travel, everyone. And I went and I like told my family. I was like so excited. I was like, I'm gonna go see things. I'm gonna go do all this stuff. I'm gonna like build something that people use everywhere around the world and stuff. And then I just got in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna build new solutions that help people all around the world. And it's like your ideas then get bigger than like this little company I was starting locally. I was like, well, I'm gonna help people locally figure out their technology. That's what I was gonna do before Logarithm convinced me. And I'm like, oh. And then after talking to them, I was like, I could help people globally. And that's what I wanted, was exactly that, is I wanted to help people globally. Now, notice I'm not talking about I wanted to learn Python. I'm not saying that I wanted to learn Go. I'm not saying that I wanted to learn Ruby on Rails and how to make unicorns fly out of a Raspberry Pi. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that I just wanted to help people globally. Like, that's what drove me, is I had just this idea. I'm like, oh, really? And a big one for me is, so like, I've spoken about it at this point. It's no secret. If you watch my channel, you know, so I am disabled. I have disabilities and things like that. And I used to not talk about it at all, like any of my disability issues and my mental health issues. But, you know, as time went on, like, a lot of what brought me into cybersecurity was actually, believe it or not, all the way back here when I worked at this place. I started working with HIPAA, and I learned how to protect my identity. So really, like, I'll delete this card a little, or I'll shrink it back down. But really, HIPAA and like my desire to protect my identity. And I was so worried about my disabilities, because in college, this is something I used to be embarrassed about. I'm not embarrassed about it anymore, because I do just fine. But like in college, I had to have like assistants where they were like, he has to have special needs to you know, in his classes. And I was just like, teacher, just read these papers and just leave me alone. Don't even ask me about it. I just don't want to talk about it. Just read the papers and cooperate. Like, I just wouldn't talk about it back then. And so like HIPAA, as soon as I learned more about HIPAA, I was like, I can protect my identity. I can protect my health information. I can protect these things, and I can protect my career. So really, we could change that to the desire to protect my career is the way that we could put that. And this is something that a lot of disabled folks probably have things about, is there's a strong need to protect your career when you're disabled. It's just a thing, because people will judge you for no good reason, where it's like, they'll be like, oh, you're disabled. It's like, yeah, I'm just fine though. It's like, I'm fully cognitively present. There's nothing wrong with me. And they're like, there's something wrong with you. You're like, but no, there's nothing wrong with me. Anyways, people are weird about that stuff. And so you learn that at a young age. So that was something where I'm just going to even change it as fear is something that drove me into the cybersecurity space. Really, if we're just going to be honest. And am I stomping on myself by saying I was scared? Yes, I was. So what did I do? I used my fear to protect myself with things like wanting to protect myself. So this is just like a human response. And you know, as we get older, we get more sophisticated, we learn more, we learn how to protect ourselves in different ways. There's a value to openness that I've learned these days, but back then I didn't understand that there was a value to that, and I didn't know how to talk about things in a way that would make it not like make me unemployable and things like that. Because you have to prove to people that you can do the job, and that's important. It is important. But a lot of folks will discriminate, and so it's like I won't work with folks who will discriminate. I just don't do it because I already have enough weird things. So anyways, so Logarithm was like, yeah, you can travel, you can do all kinds of stuff. And I was just like, this is awesome. So I went over to Logarithm with high hopes to travel, and I did. I traveled a lot. So I got to, especially traveled. And I was really excited to go overseas and do a lot of like consulting and stuff like that overseas. And just a couple shout outs to some people who were just like very helpful. I appreciate my managers. I appreciate all the people who helped me. And I know some folks are weird about identity stuff. Some of the folks who people publicly know who manage me is folks know that I worked with James Carter. So I did work with James. So thank you, James. You actually had a huge, tremendous impact on how I see business and how I understand stuff. There was a day when James was like, you need to learn how to talk to executives. I was like, talk to executives? What does that mean? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, James. I don't understand. And then I started getting all anxious. And then he like set me down and was like, let me explain this to you. And then he was cool about it. And I was like, oh, that was actually really helpful. So thanks, James. And not just that was just like one of many examples. But I started going through a lot of hard times, especially as once again, I have like weird things that I had to deal with. And some people who were just helpful, like along the way, I met people like Nadine Tanner, who I still talk to this day, who's not necessarily with Logarithm. And like people like, once again, a lot of people I don't know whose names I can say because there's a thing about privacy and things like that. So I do value people's privacy. So if things that are easily Googleable, I'll put those out there. For things that aren't easily Googleable, names that aren't easily Googleable, or people who... Anyways, Logarithm, there's a lot of great folks over there, and I'd love to give shout-outs to some of you who are fine having a shout-out. So I learned a lot at Logarithm. Not only were they willing to mentor me, not only were they willing to kind of help me understand a lot of like the business process, I would get really frustrated with my development because one of the issues I had at Logarithm was not Logarithm's fault, was I didn't understand like the value, like I didn't know what the value of what we did was as developers. How do I say this? Development. Yeah. So I didn't know the value of development. This was a thing that I had to learn, which over years I've learned more and more in how this works, especially running a business. You run a business, you will understand the value of software and development. If you don't run a business, I'm sure you can learn it in other ways. It could just be like working with people or different people come from different backgrounds or different contexts. But one of the things that I really did not understand when I was, working with Logarithm, doing consulting, doing all of these different things, is I didn't realize like what the overall value was or how to leverage it or any of those other things. And so finally, that kind of led to something that was kind of sad. But I will say that thank you to the people who were running the company at Logarithm. They helped me get through some very kind of traumatic times for me. And in that moment, I did need to stop to kind of focus on my health. So I did leave Logarithm to focus on my health. And at the same time, I was starting... My solution to that was I have to figure out how to continue my career. And a lot of folks wonder, like, what's the thing that drove me? Because people are like, you're not going to keep trying to run this business. It's like, I don't think people really understood my circumstances. My circumstances were like, I had incurred a new health situation that now I know how to navigate, and I didn't know how to navigate it at the time. And so I didn't know how to be present. I didn't know how to show, like cooperate with my body in ways to where I was capable of being present, I guess is one way to put it, where like my body will fight me if I try to do certain things. And so I wanted to spend time to figure out how to work, and now I've figured it out. But then I built and grew a business, and so that's the part that brought us to where I learned a lot building a business. And it's still growing. I guess I'm out of colors, so I'll just leave this at the bottom and we'll go on to the next thing. And, you know, those who've been following me, like Notia Point, that's when I started Notia Point. You start as data design, right? So I started this company called Data Design. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start this company called Data Design. And I'm going to try to figure out how to support myself. Like, just straight up. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to support myself with all of my setbacks, all of these other things that, you know, say societally that there's no way I should ever be able to figure this out. There's no way I should be able to, like, run a business. Running a business is harder than just working a job. So why would I be able to build a business if I can't work a job? The thing for me is I need flexibility. I have a need for flexibility. And with the internet and the type of career I've gone into is, like, I do engineering. So I can have flexibility with, like, engineering. Easy, because it's like I can work the same amount of general hours as anybody else as long as I can navigate my disability. Done. Who cares? As long as I can work remotely, things like that, like I can do just about anything and then some. And so I had to figure out how to navigate this new world life situation when I can't really work like your standard routine. Like I can't show up at an office at 9 to 5 like normal folks do. A lot of my clients have run into that, and we've talked about it, and they still kept working. But thank you, I appreciate your graces, because I've had clients who are just like, hey, I'm like, let's talk about it. And so that's what I learned as a business owner is you just got to talk. And straight up, if you want to help grow business, you want to help people grow their businesses and grow your business too, and everyone grow together and everyone win together, then you got to grow. And then finally that led to I got to the point where I am ready to join an engineering team so that I can do what I love doing. And like Notia Point, like that company it's a software company, so we're still growing, and that's like more than me now. So like my part's rather small. Like I show up on Thursdays and make sure things are continuing to work, and then the Olympiad is kind of my personal platform, so that's just like my thing. So finally, Blumira. So why did I choose Blumira, and why would Blumira want to work with me? Because also, if other people are looking for work, shouldn't you know why someone might actually care to hire you? Because there are reasons why someone would hire you. And sometimes, like, we might not necessarily know why those reasons might be, but I think it's important to know what your value is to a company. And one big thing for me is I know what my value is to a company. I know particularly what I'm good at. I know what I excel like the best at. And then the other thing is because I have some things that prevent me from kind of getting distracted like other people do. I have less distractions than most people, so it's really easy for me to spend a lot of time on things like development and building things. And so in a lot of ways, like while other people have all these other things that might prevent them from growing in certain areas, and it could even be over good things, you know. It's just, I have self-interest in technology. I have, like, an aptitude for technology on top of that. But I think the self-interest is where things go the most. Because when I was running a business, what I learned is, and like I said, I still run it, but I mean like launching the business, like getting Notia Point to the point where it can like run itself. Ideally, if you build a business, you want it to run itself. If you have to like be in the business and stay in the business forever and the business can't run without you, that you can do it. It just really depends on, I guess, preference. Because some people that would rather just like run their business and just have like their business that they run, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just fine. It comes down, once again, preference. Do you have a preference to just do that? Or otherwise, you want your business to like go up and run without you. So for Blumira, I got to the point where my company runs without me. More or less. Very like I have like very minimal involvement. I just make sure things are moving in the right directions. And then on top of that, a lot of the things that I'm interested in, like engineering wise, kind of just benefit the company anyways. So like my hobbies benefit. Just by doing my hobby, I don't really have to think about running Notia Point. What is my hobby? So let's say, like, what brings me to Blumira? Strange hobbies. You could think of it as DevSecOps, watch my channel. and watch what I talk about. That's my hobby, more or less. But it also is something that I do business around. So my company runs without me, and then I have this DevSecOps hobby. So like, what do I do on the weekend? I play with things like Kubernetes and Docker and come up with like automation formats. I find this to be fascinating. So once again, what does this have to do with is self-interest, right? What helps a developer get better at what they do is pursuing what they generally have enough interest in. Because if you don't have interest in like lines of code, I mean, you could like, this is pretty much it. Like if you don't have an interest in working with code, the minute you start looking at lines of code, you're just gonna look at it and be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to just, and then your like eyes glaze over, and maybe it meant something for about 15 minutes before you get so bored that it's like watching paint dry. And that's what I've learned about people who don't have an interest in software development. Like maybe they wish they did, or maybe they want to have an interest in software development. But what I've found is like people who don't really have any form of self-interest in it, oftentimes it just doesn't really turn into something. And then also the other thing is Blumira has things that I'm very interested in working on that I really just want to spend most of my time working on, which is Sim. And then also what I do happens to be valuable, and like, so like my skills match what they need, and that's it. That is how getting an ideal job works, is spend a long time figuring out what you're good at. So let me just let's see, let me rearrange this a little bit. So if I got hired at Blumira to work with the engineering team, then what's something that leads us over to that? Basically, you just need to have having the right skills. Now, that's a complicated one because you have to have ways to validate and prove that you have the skills, because no matter what you're doing, if you don't have a way to prove what you do, so like what's the big one that I do? I have a super strong portfolio, because like my hobbies are aligned with a lot of what I do, which is why if you have self-interest in things, if you find where your self-interest lies, it's a lot easier to figure out how to get into things, because it's like, okay, so company runs without me, DevSecOps things. I want to do something. I want to use my skills. I want to have a good time. And so what's another thing that drives me is I guess a desire for more community. Like, while I build a community in general, I've been growing the community, YouTube and LinkedIn and all that good stuff. I just always have a desire for community, and one of the things that I want is I want to grow with other developers too. And so I'm also pursuing something that's meaningful from a people standpoint, where for me, what is it really about? Ultimately, for me, it's all about the people. And ultimately, you know, the people you work with are going to be closer to you than a lot of the people that you know, you live with, or your family members and things like that, because we're working together, we're building things together, we're doing meaningful things together. Well, now some people don't necessarily go work in the realm of their passion, so maybe it's not meaningful to some people. But if you are a passion person, and you're the type of person who kind of has to have some reason to feel like what you're doing matters, it's just all about the people. And so just be good to people. Like, be kind, be thankful, things like that, Like, I would go so far as to say that an attitude of gratitude is everything. I would just say have an attitude of gratitude. Because it's connecting with people who you'd appreciate working with, who you think would appreciate working with you, or at least that's the way that I prefer to do my job searches. I'm sure other people are driven by different things. I guess some people are driven by money, but what I found is people who seem to claim that they're driven by money don't really seem to be actually driven by money, because once they get to a certain financial bar, it's funny, like you read it in the blogs and things like that, but people get to a certain financial bar and then they'll just kind of stop trying as hard because all of a sudden they have enough money to kind of be where they kind of feel happy enough to be doing whatever they're doing. But, some people could be driven by money. I guess there are people who are just like, I just have to make more. And while, I make plenty, that's not what drives me. What drives me is like working with the right people, all that good stuff, because I could probably, I go work for some giant company like Microsoft and be like some nameless person and things like that. But I want to follow something where I'm going to feel not like, and I like Microsoft, believe it or not, but I want to feel like people actually know me. I want to get to know them. I want to spend time with the people. And I guess that's why I like working with startups. Some people probably do prefer working with the big companies, things like that, like different environments, things like that. But I really like to work with, like, I do like working with startups. I've learned this. I do like working with like new technologies and building up those new technologies. And so a lot of what brought me to doing what I'm doing is following a lot of those self-interests and things like that. And so that's something that I would like to talk about. And just, everyone has their own story with how their career is built and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. I've got mine. Other people have theirs. And everyone has the thing that makes them feel good about what they're doing. It could be some cool perks. It could be the travel. It could be a lot of things. And for me, once upon a time, it was the travel, believe it or not. And I still love to travel, but I'm not going to stop traveling. So that part to me now is I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to travel because that's what I do. It's the thing that I do, even if I have like weird mobility issues. But that aside, I want to work with people who I like working with, people who I appreciate. And that's the kind of environment that I generally have a preference for. And so, like, for people who want to work at companies and things like that, who are like that, it's know what you want. Figure out what you want. It's kind of funny because I made this Where to Begin series, and in the Where to Begin, I think in the very first video of the Where to Begin series, I talk about self-awareness and talk about figure out what you want. You might not even know what you want right now. And a lot of folks don't. I didn't at one point. I was like, I have no idea what I want. And so I was just doing random things. And one person asked me one time, how do you figure out what you want? If you don't know what you want, how do you figure that out? I'm at this point a believer in just do things. As long as you don't stop doing things, your actions will lead you to where you're supposed to be or where you should end up being or the right place. Because if you're doing things, then you're showing the world and doing things that allow you to connect with others, right? Not just like you could go home and I would say from a career development standpoint, because doing things is valuable too. Well, I don't know, just doing things. Your actions will lead you to where you belong. That's something that I believe. So, anyways, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved. I want to say thank you to Logarithm. I want to say thank you to all the people who really trained me up over there, who taught me all these different types of things that I never even knew were possible and stuff like that. And really, I've gotten to the point where I'm trying to figure out how to improve middle school education, and even Logarithm supportive of things like that. And so I just want to thank everyone who's been involved, and yeah, it's just been a ride. It's been a lot. So some other folks who are worth noting is if you go and look through my YouTube channel, you can hear a little bit about some of my past experiences with those who I've used to work with. like Q and Greg Foss and AC and other folks who, you know, they're off doing their things too, you know, on their journeys. And folks who do things end up somewhere, and folks who build things end up somewhere building things. And I'm a person who builds things. I'm going to keep building things. And what this really means is now I just got to spend all my time building things and continuing to work on the projects. And it'll be probably even easier for me to stream and things like that. Well, I don't know about easier to stream, but I like talking about this stuff online. I think it's fun. I like talking about careers, like how did we get here? What did we do for all of this to happen the way that it did? And maybe that's like the forensic specialist that talking in me still, where it's like, oh, well, where did this come from? Well, why did that have to happen that way? Well, what was the thing that caused that thing to cause this other thing over there that did this thing over that, like that? So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now, and I just want to say thank you to everyone. I'm very excited to be on the Blumira engineering team. We're going to be building some very exciting things together. Feel free to follow Blumira to see what they're building, and then if you're already following me and watching this, then you'll see the things that I'm talking about too, because I talk about fundamentals and DevSecOps. So if you want to know what DevSecOps is and things like that, then tune in, because that's the sort of thing that I talk about. Data science, DevSecOps, especially the fundamentals and the basics, and then things like how do you build a career doing some of these things, or at least, yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out like the best things for the new angle, but I have a lot more opportunities for how I can be a lot more creative. I want to get a lot more creative with this, to be honest. So I'm going to be trying to come up with some creative things. I'm also working on a virtual reality land that's going to live in VR chat. And I know VR chat is kind of crazy and out there, but it lets you make like little lands. So expect me to probably stream some of that when I figure that out a little further. So far, I've just kind of gotten started with all of it, but I'm going to be developing some things. And also, on top of developing VR land, we're going to be building Sim with Blumira, and we're going to be building, let's just go over to their website, because some folks probably don't even know what Blumira is. Let's just go over to Blumira.com. So Blumira is an automate threat detection and response platform. If you want to know a lot more about what Blumira does, you can do things like...
This is going to be a quick few-minute demo walkthrough of the Blumira product.
You can watch these videos and things, and then you can check out all of this stuff and find out who's Blumira. What do they do? What do I do? What I do is the stuff with these good folks over here. So we're going to be building solutions together, and I'm looking forward to that. And all of you will get to see what comes out of that. So